Go ahead. Judge me if you want. People hear that I came home pregnant by another man and decide I must have walked in smiling, like I had won something ugly. I did not come home to mock my husband. I came home because the man who promised me a future vanished the moment that future had a heartbeat, and I thought marriage meant someone still stood there when the pretty parts were gone. If that makes me selfish, fine. But before you call me heartless, ask what kind of husband lets his wife feel alone long before another man ever touches her life. Jonah only closed the family calendar with that calm hand of his, and I thought calm meant he was finally ready to do the right thing. My name is Elena March. I was 34, and I worked as admissions director for a private school where parents paid deposits before their children could spell future. I knew how families sold themselves. I knew which mothers wore soft colours and which fathers said we instead of I. I knew how to make a house, a child, and two adults look like a promise. That was the part I was good at. Living inside one was harder. Jonah and I had been together 9 years and married 6. He was not a cruel man. That matters because if he had been cruel, my story would be easier. He was steady, thoughtful, responsible in the way people praised at dinner and forgot to ask whether it made a woman feel wanted. He remembered oil changes, insurance, and dentist appointments. He loved through systems, calendars, receipts, full gas tanks. At first, that felt like safety. The year my father had a stroke, Jonah became the person who held every loose piece of my life. He drove my mother to the hospital, packed my office bag, and answered school emails when I could not look at another parent using the word crisis for a missed tour slot. One night, I came home and found him at our dining table with medical bills, insurance forms, and my father's medication list sorted into folders. He said my brain deserved one less room on fire. I cried into his shirt that night. He held me like I was something breakable and worth keeping. For a while, I believed that was enough. Then the same steadiness started to feel like a wall. If I said I felt invisible, Jonah asked what had happened. If I said I missed being touched like a woman and not managed like a household, he said he had been tired and would try to be more present. Try. Present. Those were his words. Soft words. Responsible words. Words that made desire sound like a meeting we could schedule. The family calendar hung beside the dining room doorway. Cream paper, thin black lines, little brass clip at the top. I bought it the first month we were married because it looked like proof. Jonah filled it better than I did. Dinner with my mother, school gala, mortgage call, dentist. His handwriting was small and square. By the spring before everything broke, I hated that calendar. It knew more about our marriage than I did. Jonah came home one Thursday with soup because I had texted that my stomach felt strange. He set it on the dining table, checked the calendar, and asked if I had moved the school donor tour. I looked at him holding the pen, calm as always, and something in me went cold. I told him he did not have to manage every breath I took. He said he was only trying not to miss what mattered to me. That should have softened me. Instead, I heard a man who still thought love was not missing appointments. He closed the calendar gently, palm flat over the week, like he could smooth the edge off what I had said. That was Jonah. Close the calendar. Lower the volume. Make the room livable. I read it as control because control was easier to hate than neglect. 3 weeks later, Nico Alvarez walked into my office with a transfer application for his niece and smiled at me like I was not part of the furniture. Nico should not have mattered. That is the first lie every woman tells herself when attention arrives wearing a good coat. He was 38, not the child's father, only the uncle handling paperwork because his sister had just moved back from Miami. He owned a small restaurant group and spoke about everything as if the world could be persuaded if he leaned close enough. I had dealt with men like him at school events. Charming, restless, used to doors opening. But Nico looked at me in a way Jonah had stopped looking. Not kindly. Kindness was not the issue. Jonah was kind. Jonah could make tea without asking, warm my car before sunrise, and stand behind me at a faculty dinner with one hand at my back like a quiet guard. Nico looked hungry. That is the cleaner word. Hungry for the room, for the answer, for me to keep talking after the application questions ended. I told myself I was only enjoying being seen. The first deliberate line was small. Nico asked if I could recommend a family photographer because his sister wanted the school application to look polished. I gave him the name from my personal phone instead of the office email. There was no reason. There was every reason. He messaged that evening to thank me. Then he asked if admissions directors always sounded like they were saving families from themselves. I laughed at my phone before I could decide not to. Jonah saw the laugh. Of course he did. He was standing by the family calendar adding a reminder for my school's spring showcase. He asked if something good had happened. I said it was work. He nodded and wrote spring showcase in his small square letters. Then he paused, capped the pen, and closed the calendar without adding his usual check mark beside it. I noticed. I told myself I did not. Nico became a thread I could pull when the day felt too tight. A photo of a table setting from one of his restaurants. A voice note about how parents at private schools all looked like they were auditioning for a bank commercial. A joke about my perfect little office with its pale rug and glass candy bowl. He made me feel like the woman behind the role, not the role itself. Mariel was the only person I told at first. She taught kindergarten at the school and had spent years turning other people's mistakes into funny stories over parking lot coffee. She said harmless attention was not a crime. She said married women were allowed to remember they had blood. She said Jonah was sweet, but sweet could become a locked room. I needed someone to say that, so I let her. The first time Nico touched my wrist, we were in the school courtyard after a scholarship reception. Nothing dramatic, no music, no rain, just string lights, empty dessert plates, and parents pretending not to watch the tuition board members. He said I had powdered sugar on my sleeve and brushed it away with his thumb. He let his hand stay there 1 second too long, and I carried that second home like proof. Jonah asked why I was quiet. I said I was tired. He asked if I wanted him to cancel dinner with his sister that weekend. There it was again, a solution where I wanted a question with heat in it. I told him not everything could be fixed by moving boxes on a calendar. He looked toward the dining room doorway. The family calendar was open to April. His sister's dinner was written in blue. My showcase was written in black. There was a blank square on Sunday where we used to write walk by the lake when we were first married, before walks became errands and errands became proof of functioning. Jonah took the pen from the brass clip and wrote lake in that blank square. For 1 second I almost hated him for trying. That sounds ugly because it was ugly. His effort arrived after my need had already gone looking for another witness. I did not go to the lake with him. I told Jonah a parent meeting had run long. I met Nico at his closed restaurant instead, the one with green tile behind the bar and chairs turned upside down on tables. He cooked pasta because he said every woman who spent her life evaluating families deserved 1 hour where no one evaluated her. I remember the steam on the windows. I remember the smell of garlic and lemon. I remember thinking Jonah would have asked if I needed water, and Nico asked what I wanted. There is a difference when you are already starving. The next morning, Jonah had left the word lake on the calendar. He had not crossed it out. He had not circled it. He had only drawn a small line under it, the way he marked things that had not happened but still mattered. I stood in the dining room with my purse over one shoulder and stared at that one underlined word. I could have apologized. I could have said I was sorry work ran late, even if that was not the real apology. Instead, I took the pen from the brass clip and wrote school tour over the same square. Jonah saw it when he came home. He did not ask. That bothered me more than a question would have. Questions let me perform. Silence made me explain myself to myself, and by then my explanations had Nico's voice in them. Nico said Jonah did not fight because Jonah had already decided comfort was enough. He said a woman like me should not have to beg her own husband to look up from a calendar. He said it like he was angry for me. and borrowed anger can feel like love when you are tired. At school, the families still came in pairs, mothers and fathers with folders, questions, matching coats, shared nerves. I watched them from behind my admissions desk and started dividing them in my head. The ones who still touched each other without thinking. The ones who looked like they had become a transportation company for their children. The ones who would survive because one person had agreed to need less. I told myself Jonah and I had become the last kind. That was the lie that made room for Nico. By June, I had become fluent in omission. I did not lie every day. That was how I protected myself from the word liar. I left out names, changed times, said work when I meant Nico, said Marielle when I meant I needed someone to tell me I was not destroying my life. Jonah asked fewer questions as the weeks passed. I read that as trust. It was not trust. It was him closing the calendar one square at a time. The pregnancy test was not poetic. It was cheap plastic on the edge of the sink in a school staff bathroom that smelled like hand soap and bleach. I had bought it during lunch and hidden it under a stack of admissions folders like paper could make it less real. 2 lines appeared before the timer on my phone finished. I stood there with my hand on the stall door. Not crying, not smiling, just counting the tiles above the sink, because counting was easier than naming. 6 white tiles. 1 cracked corner. A brown water stain near the vent. That was how I became pregnant by another man. I told Nico first because the clean version required him to become serious, steady, maybe even grateful. He had talked about new beginnings as if they were menus. He had said life was too short to sleep beside someone who made you feel alone. He had said Jonah did not know what he had. Men say things like that when the future is still air. I met him in his restaurant office after closing. The room was too small for the news. A desk, 2 chairs, invoices clipped to a board, a framed review from a magazine near the door. Nico looked handsome in the tired way he liked women to notice. I told him I was pregnant. I said it quietly because quiet felt more adult. He did not touch me. That was the first answer. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. He asked how far along. I told him what the clinic had said. He sat back and rubbed both hands over his face like I had brought him a bill he had not approved. I said we could figure it out. He said my marriage made everything complicated. My marriage. Not our baby. Not our choice. My marriage. I heard the door begin to close. For 2 weeks I tried to keep it open. Nico answered messages later, then shorter. He said he needed time. He said his business was under pressure. He said his sister's custody mess had taught him not to walk into legal storms. He did not say he loved me. He did not say he would be there. He used careful words, and careful words from a loud man feel colder than silence from a quiet one. Mariel told me he was panicking. She said men needed time to grow into fear. She said Jonah, for all his faults, would never let a child suffer. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Jonah would never let a child suffer. It began as comfort. Then it became a plan. I stopped thinking of going home as confession. I started thinking of it as asking my husband to be the man he claimed to be. Had he not promised for better or worse? Had he not built our life around responsibility? Had he not spent years proving he could carry whatever I dropped? The baby was innocent. That part was true. The baby had not lied. The baby had not chosen Nico. The baby deserved stability. I used that truth like a coat over everything else. The clinic had given me another paper too, a small list of vitamins, foods to avoid, warning signs, appointment times, practical things, Jonah things. I sat in my car outside the pharmacy with that paper open on the steering wheel and hated how badly I wanted to send it to him. Not Nico. Jonah. Nico would tell me not to panic. Jonah would know which vitamins were covered by insurance and which pharmacy stayed open late. That should have told me who I trusted. Instead, I twisted it into proof that Jonah was built for this kind of responsibility. I called Marielle before going home. She was in her classroom and I could hear children singing through the wall. I told her I was going to be honest with Jonah. She said honest was the right word only if I was prepared to accept his answer. I told her there was only one decent answer. She went quiet. That was happening more often with her, little pockets of quiet where applause used to be. I told myself pregnancy made people cautious around me. Then I called Nico one more time. He did not answer. I left a message saying I was going to talk to Jonah and that I hoped he understood I was doing what was best for the baby. I said baby, not our baby. Some part of me had already heard his answer and was cleaning the sentence for him. The appointment card came in a pale blue envelope from the clinic. I stared at it in my car for almost 10 minutes before going inside our apartment. Jonah was at the dining table with his laptop open. The family calendar lay beside him, unclipped from the wall. That stopped me. He had never taken it down before. I asked what he was doing. He said the clip was loose. I believed him because I needed the world to stay ordinary for 5 more minutes. He closed the laptop when he saw my face. Not quickly, not guiltily, just with that calm attention he gave leaking pipes and unpaid bills and me when I became a problem he could name. He asked what happened. I placed the blue envelope on the table between us. He did not touch it. I told him I was pregnant. The room made no sound. Outside, someone in the hallway laughed near the elevator, then a door shut. Jonah's eyes stayed on the envelope. His hand moved to the family calendar, palm flat over the blank month page. He asked if the baby was his. I could have lied. That is the part I still give myself credit for, because when people tell this story back, they make me worse in ways that let them feel cleaner. I did not lie about that. I said no. Jonah nodded once, not because he understood, not because he forgave me. Because his body needed one small motion to put the fact somewhere. I told him Nico had left me alone with it. His eyes lifted then. Not angry. That would have been easier. He looked at me like I had walked in carrying a house fire and asked where he kept the good towels. I said the baby needed stability. I said I needed help. I said he was my husband. That word did the work I wanted it to do. Husband. Jonah looked at the calendar under his hand. Then he slid the blue envelope back toward me without opening it. He asked why I had come to him after the man I chose refused to stay. That should have been the question that stopped me. Instead, it became the question I decided to punish him for asking. I slept in the guest room that night because I told myself Jonah needed space. That sounded generous. The truth was that I did not want to watch him be calm. I wanted grief I could argue with. I wanted shouting, accusations, a slammed door. I wanted proof that I still had enough power to make him break shape. He did none of that. In the morning he made coffee. 1 cup. His. He had made mine every morning for 6 years unless he travelled. I stood in the hallway and looked at the empty space beside the machine like it was evidence of violence. He asked if I had eaten. I told him not to perform concern if he was planning to punish me. He said asking whether a pregnant woman had eaten was not performance. Pregnant woman, not wife, not Eleanor, not us. The words landed too clean. I said the baby was innocent. He said he knew. I said children needed stable homes. He said he knew that too. I said then he should understand what I was asking. He looked at me for a long moment, then asked if I understood what I was asking. That irritated me. Men like Jonah loved turning simple pain into a question with corners. I told him I was asking him to help me raise a child who had done nothing wrong. I told him if he had ever loved me, he would not make a baby pay for my mistake. I used baby because it sounded cleaner than consequence. I used mistake because affair had teeth. Jonah closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened the family calendar on the table. The month was blank. He had taken off every page after June. I asked why he did that. He said he did not want to keep planning a life without knowing what life we were discussing. I heard drama. I heard punishment. I did not hear goodbye. He asked if Nico knew about the appointment next Tuesday. I said Nico was overwhelmed. Jonah asked if Nico knew the clinic name. I said that was not the point. He asked if Nico had offered money, transportation, a plan, anything beyond fear. I told him he was interrogating me. He said he was trying to find the father in the story I had brought home. That sentence cut because it was accurate. So I changed the wound. I told him fatherhood was more than biology. I said any decent man knew that. I said maybe this was his chance to prove he was more than schedules and folded laundry. His face changed then. Not much. A small tightening near the mouth. Real sadness. Simple and unplanned. For a second, I saw him at my father's hospital bed, writing medication times on a napkin because the nurse had run out of printed sheets. I saw him carrying my mother into our apartment after she cried too hard to stand in the parking garage. I saw him doing the quiet father work of our whole life, not because he had children, but because everyone handed him what they could not hold. Then I closed that door. I needed him guilty. So I told him he had loved being useful until usefulness required something real. He stood up slowly and took the calendar with him. He clipped it back on the wall, but he did not add anything. Just blank squares under a brass clip. A month with no promises. That was the S4 clue. A person who understood Jonah would have seen it. I did not. I called Mariel from my car after I left for work. She answered on the second ring, too bright. I told her Jonah was being cold. I told her he kept asking about Nico instead of the baby. I told her he was acting like biology mattered more than marriage. Mariel went quiet. I asked if she was still there. She said she was. Then she asked whether I was asking Jonah to be a father or asking him to make the affair survivable. I hated her for that. Not loudly. Quietly. Efficiently. I told her she sounded just like everyone else who thought women had to be perfect before they deserved help. She said that was not what she meant. I said meaning was easy when you were not the one alone. At school, I moved through family interviews like a woman standing behind glass. A mother in a cream sweater told me they wanted a community that shared their values. A father asked about emotional development. A little girl with red barrettes dropped a wooden block near my shoe, and I bent too quickly to pick it up. My stomach rolled. I pressed one hand to the desk. For 1 second, the baby became real in a way that had nothing to do with Jonah or Nico or punishment. Then my phone lit up. Nico. He wrote that he needed space and hoped I would make the best decision for everyone. Everyone. I sat at my desk with the admissions folder open in front of me and understood, briefly, that I had chosen a man who could turn his own child into a group project he did not plan to attend. The clarity lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then I thought of Jonah's blank calendar and made him the villain again because I needed somewhere to put the fear. That evening I came home with prenatal vitamins in a paper bag and set them on the dining table where Jonah would see them. I wanted him to ask. I wanted him to soften. I wanted the sight of something small and medical to pull him back into the role he had always played. He looked at the bag, then at me, then at the blank calendar. He asked if I wanted him to add anything to it. The question sounded gentle. I heard refusal hiding inside it. I told him a real family did not need an invitation to show up. He said he was trying to understand whether I was asking for help, forgiveness, or a replacement for the man who left. I said he always made care sound like categories. He said categories were easier than being used without a name. That sentence stayed in the room after he left it. I picked up the vitamins and put them in my purse, angry that he had not touched them, angrier that I had wanted him to. Before bed, I heard the calendar clip open. One small metal sound. I stood in the guest room doorway and watched Jonah remove the page, look at it, and put it back without writing anything. He did not know I was watching. That made it harder to call the gesture performance. I called it performance anyway. By Friday, I had stopped asking Jonah and started building pressure around him. That was my mistake. Not the first one. Not the worst one. But the one that made the next door close. My mother came over because I asked her to. I did not tell her everything on the phone. I gave her enough to arrive worried and ready to mother me before she knew whether I deserved it. She had always liked Jonah. Everyone liked Jonah. That was part of the problem. Men like him made women like me look unstable simply by standing still. I told her in the living room while Jonah was still at work. I said I was pregnant. I said the baby was not Jonah's. I said Nico had failed me, but Jonah was my husband, and I needed him to help me create a stable home. My mother sat very still. She asked if I heard myself. That was not the line I had brought her there to say. I told her I heard a woman trying not to let an innocent baby be punished for adult pain. I told her Jonah had always wanted to be the reliable one, and now reliability meant more than paying bills. I told her he could be angry later. She said anger was not the issue. Then Jonah came home. He saw my mother on the sofa, me standing near the blank calendar, and understood the room before anyone explained it. That was one of his gifts. He could read arrangement. A chair pulled too far back. A glass of water untouched. My mother's purse still on her shoulder because she had not decided whether she was staying. He asked if I had invited my mother to help us talk, or to help me corner him. I said if he felt cornered by the truth, maybe he should ask why. My mother said my name softly. I ignored her. Jonah took off his coat, folded it over the chair, and asked me one final question. He wanted to know whether I was willing to say, plainly, that I had chosen another man, become pregnant, been abandoned by him, and returned to my husband because he was safer. Plainly. That word made me feel stripped, so I refused the shape of it. I said I had been lonely. I said Jonah had made marriage feel like a shared office. I said Nico had seen me when Jonah only managed me. I said the baby did not deserve to begin life inside Jonah's pride. Then I said the one true thing. I told Jonah he had made me feel alone for years, and he could not act shocked that I went somewhere else to feel wanted. He did not refute it. The silence after that should have satisfied me. It did not. It scared me, because for once the truth I threw at him did not bring him closer. It only stood there between us, true and useless. Jonah said I was right that he had failed me. He said he had hidden inside care because desire made him feel clumsy and need made him feel weak. He said he should have fought harder for the woman he married before she started looking for proof she still existed. My mother looked down at her hands. I almost softened. Then Jonah said, my loneliness did not make him the father of another man's child. I felt the room shift against me, so I pushed harder. I told him a real husband did not abandon a pregnant wife. I said the vows did not contain exceptions for humiliation. I said if he walked away now, everyone would know what kind of man he really was. There it was, the voluntary line. Public enough because my mother heard it. Cruel enough because I meant it to scare him. I was not asking any more. I was making his refusal cost him. Jonah looked at my mother, then at me, then at the blank family calendar on the wall. He asked if I wanted him to write the appointment there. I said yes. He took the pen from the little brass clip. His hand was steady. I thought that meant I had won the first inch. He wrote one word in next Tuesday's square. Elena. Not baby appointment. Not clinic. Not our appointment. Just my name. I stared at it. He capped the pen and said he would drive me if there was a medical emergency and no one else could. He said he would not punish a child. He said he would not let me turn basic decency into fatherhood. Then he said he would handle the rest properly. Properly. That word again. I almost laughed because even the end of our marriage sounded like a filing cabinet. My mother stood and said she needed air. She did not hug me before stepping into the hallway. I told myself she was overwhelmed. I told myself she would call later and apologize for freezing when I needed her. She did not call. Mariel did not answer my message that night either. I sent her a picture of the calendar square with my name on it and wrote that Jonah had made the baby invisible. The message showed delivered. No reply. 1 hour, 2. Nothing. Nico answered only once. He said he was sorry things were hard and that he could not be pulled into my marriage. My marriage. Again. Like the child had arrived by paperwork and not by him. By Sunday, I had built a cleaner story. Jonah was punishing me. My mother was judging me. Marielle was protecting her job. Nico was weak, yes, but Jonah was worse because Jonah had promised. That was the version I brought to Jonah's sister's house for dinner. I did not call it ambush in my head. I called it family accountability. That sounded better. It made me the brave one walking into a hard room instead of the desperate one dragging witnesses toward a man who had asked for quiet. I packed the clinic envelope, the vitamin list, and the appointment card in my purse like documents for a case I was not admitting I had built. I told myself Claire would know how to reach him. Sisters knew the doors wives could not find. If Jonah would not listen to me as a husband, maybe he would listen with his family watching. He had asked me not to come. I came anyway. I wore a soft blue dress because it made the pregnancy feel visible without making me look desperate. I brought the clinic envelope in my purse. I told myself his sister Claire would understand family once family was sitting in front of her. Jonah opened the door before I rang. He looked tired, not angry. Tired in the way people look when they have already carried something to the curb. He said this was not a good idea. I told him hiding me would not make him decent. Then I stepped past him into the house and smiled at Claire like I was still the woman everyone knew how to welcome. Claire's dining room had a round table, which made it impossible to choose sides without everyone seeing. Jonah sat across from me. Claire sat to his left. Her husband stood near the doorway with both hands in his pockets. My mother was there too. I had not known she would be there. That was the first thing I refused to understand. The family calendar from our apartment lay flat in the center of the table. Jonah must have brought it. The page was open to next Tuesday. One word sat in the square. Elena. I said I did not know we were staging an intervention. Jonah stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not look at my stomach. He looked at me, and that was worse. He said the first clue had been the calendar. For months, he said, I had stopped adding us to it. I added school events, late meetings, dinners I did not invite him to, and blank evenings I called work. He said he kept closing it because every open square had become a place where I disappeared. My hand went to the back of the chair. He said the second clue was Nico's name appearing everywhere except my mouth. Restaurant receipts, changed appointment times, Marielle's sudden carefulness, my mother's calls asking why I sounded far away. He had not needed a test. He had needed me to stop pretending he was cruel for noticing. Claire looked at me then. Not with hatred, with pity, which felt smaller. Jonah touched the calendar page once. He said when I came home pregnant he understood the last square. I had not come home because he was my family. I had come home because the family I chose had refused to hold. I said the baby was innocent. He said the baby was the only innocent person in the story. That left me with nowhere clean to stand. I tried to say he was abandoning me. My mother shook her head once, one small movement. It stopped the sentence before it became useful. Nico's part ended in 2 lines because that was all he deserved. Claire said he had called Jonah that morning, not to take responsibility, but to ask whether Jonah could keep his name out of any school or restaurant gossip. Jonah said Nico had chosen his reputation before the child had even been born. That was the conflict partner's exit. Not dramatic, just complete. Then Jonah said the sentence I thought I had prepared myself to hear. He said I was not the woman he married anymore, not because I was pregnant, not because the baby existed, because the woman he married would have been ashamed to use a child as a lever, and I had walked into his sister's house, ready to make refusal look like cruelty. One legal line followed, flat and brief. The separation petition had been filed, and temporary financial boundaries would come through the proper channel. The rest came without speeches. Housing. Jonah stayed in the apartment because I left 2 days later to my mother's guest room. Finances. The joint account became bills only, and my personal card carried the clinic costs I had expected him to absorb. Social circle. Claire stopped inviting me. Marielle kept every conversation at work level, and my mother loved me in a quieter, sadder way. Nico. He sent one transfer and no promises. Work. I spent all day selling families a picture I could no longer stand inside. After dinner, Jonah handed me the calendar. The brass clip was still loose. The page was still blank except for my name. I wanted him to keep it because if he kept it, maybe some part of us was still scheduled somewhere. He did not. He said the calendar belonged to the life I kept asking other people to fill in for me. I carried it home under my arm with the clinic envelope in my purse. The baby moved for the first time that night. Or maybe I only imagined it because I needed something inside me to answer. I asked my husband to help me build a family from the life I broke, and he showed me I had already chosen one without him.